A few weeks ago, on a typical Thursday morning, I was in the midst of our usual hectic routine, getting our two kids ready for school at 7:30. The usual chaos was briefly interrupted by the loud ringing of the phone. I became curious, wondering who could be calling at such an early hour. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar code, which piqued my interest even more. "Hello?" I answered cautiously, holding the phone to my ear. To my surprise, it was Claire, my wife. On a few weeks ago, on a typical Thursday morning, I was in the middle of our usual routine of getting our two kids ready for school at 7:30. The phone rang, and I was curious about who could be calling so early. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar code, which made me even more curious. "Hello?" I'm holding the phone to my ear. To my surprise, it was Claire, my wife. I couldn't help but wonder why she was calling when we had just spoken the night before. Claire works for a small marketing firm, and her call immediately grabbed my attention. I take care of our children and work from home, while she's always on the move, working at a printing company in the center of our town. Despite our different schedules, it works well for us, and we manage to make a decent living. We live in a cozy suburban house with 4 bedrooms and I was confused, because we'd spoken the night before and she hadn't mentioned anything. CLA works for a small marketing firm and her call immediately grabbed my attention. I take care of our children and work from home, while she's always on the move, working at a printing company in the center of our town. Despite our different schedules, it worked well for us and we managed to make a decent living. We live in a nice suburban house with 4 bedrooms and a swimming pool, and we're fortunate to have a wide circle of friends. However, Claire told me that the previous night, when she went to the hotel lobby to get a newspaper, her purse had been stolen. "Please cancel our credit cards immediately and request new ones urgently. I've already informed Joy, my boss, about this, and she'll arrange for new American Express Company cards to be sent to me overnight, so I can have them before I leave tomorrow. She's also going to transfer some money to help me through this." "My wife, you sounded worried. You're usually very careful with your stuff, so what happened?" "I was a bit absent-minded and left my bag at the cashier's when I went to get some more reading material. When I got back, it was nowhere to be found. The cashier said she was busy with another customer and didn't notice anything unusual. My driving license was in there too, but the hotel sent staff to check the nearby dumpsters. I hope they found it." I sounded worried, right? You're usually very careful with your stuff, so what happened? "I was a bit absent-minded and left my purse at the cashier's while I went to get some more reading material. When I got back, it was nowhere to be found. The cashier said she was helping another customer and didn't notice anything unusual. My driving license was in there too, but the hotel sent staff to check the nearby dumpsters. I hope they found it, otherwise I might have to take a taxi to today's meeting. Don't worry, I'll sort out the credit cards quickly. I apologize for my mistake. Dear, hopefully apart from about $1,200 in my wallet, we won't have any extra expenses. We can replace the other cards bit by bit. Luckily, most of my makeup is still in the room, so I'll be ready for the morning presentation. How are the kids? I missed the times when we were all together. Let me tell you what happened. Thankfully, around 6 weeks ago, I managed to cancel the credit cards before any dodgy charges were made. But I still hadn't got my wallet back, which had my driving license and other stuff in it. So I put that to one side. Life carried on, but I've got something important to tell you. Today, I found a statement from Claire's Fidelity account, where she looks after a separate investment fund from the inheritance she got after her parents' sad accident a few years ago. I've always respected her privacy about the account, but while searching for our home insurance policy, I found a folder with monthly statements from her personal account. I remembered the inheritance was about $350,000 after her parents died, and I couldn't help but wonder how much it had grown to. Lo and behold, it had grown to over $400,000. While going through the statement, I noticed a withdrawal of $3,000 from the money market account. 6 weeks ago, I started wondering how she'd spent the money, so I had a look at her money market account. Lo and behold, I found out she'd written a big check to a local jewelry store just a couple of days after losing her purse in the same city. I couldn't help but wonder what she'd bought. She hadn't mentioned buying anything for me, and I hadn't heard her talk about getting jewelry for anyone else, although she has. She's got a brother, but I couldn't work out why he'd need a $3,000 gift. After thinking about it for a bit, I went to the jewelry store's website on the computer and wrote down their phone number to ask about it. I picked up the phone and called the number, and a woman said she was a store representative and asked what she could do. I told her my name and what I wanted, and she said there'd been an issue with a transaction. I couldn't work out why he needed a $3,000 gift. After thinking about it for a bit, I went to the computer and found the jewelry store's website. I wrote down their phone number to ask some questions. I picked up the phone and called the store. A woman answered and asked how she could help. I told her my name and what I wanted to buy. I explained that we had a problem with the purchase and wanted to know if there was a warranty. She looked for the transaction on her computer and asked about the problem with the rings. I was a bit confused and thought about what kind of rings she could have bought. Luckily, the woman on the phone quickly said, "Oh, I remember this purchase." When she came to our store, she was clearly upset and said that her wedding and engagement rings had been stolen. She wanted to replace them, which was quite a challenge. While we were trying to find something suitable, she used the company credit card as collateral and later sent us a check to cover the cost. Now that you've mentioned the problem with the rings, I'd like to assure you that our store provides a 90-day warranty for such situations. Is it possible that the diamond setting has become loose? This is perplexing because she spoke of replacing the wedding and engagement rings, but never indicated that she had lost them, only mentioning the theft. While we were trying to find the right options to meet her needs, she used the company's credit card as collateral and later sent us a check to cover the cost. Now that you've mentioned the issue with the rings, I'd like to assure you that our store provides a 90-day warranty for such situations. Is it possible that the diamond setting has become loose? This is perplexing because she spoke of replacing the wedding and engagement rings, but never indicated that she had lost them, only mentioning the theft of her purse. It took me some time to process this new information. Listen, I conveyed to the woman on the phone that I need to have a discussion about this with my wife before making any further decisions. I'll get back to you later with that. I bid her farewell. While she appeared somewhat puzzled, my own bewilderment was far more overwhelming. It was becoming increasingly apparent that the rings should have been inside her purse when it was stolen, but why would she carry them in her purse if I told her I'd get back to her later about the rings? I felt really confused, but she seemed a bit puzzled too. I thought the rings should have been in her handbag when it was stolen, but I didn't get why she'd have them on her. As far as I knew, there were no professional reasons why you have to say if you're married. But then I started thinking about it, and I got a bit worried that she might be having an affair. I'd been married for 11 years and we had 2 great kids, Jeremy, who's 10. I didn't think there was any need to hide that she was married. There didn't seem to be any professional reasons not to tell people about your spouse, but if she wanted to seem unmarried in certain situations, it made me wonder if she might have been thinking about having an affair while she was away. Just the thought of it made me feel sick. We'd been married for 11 years and had 2 great kids, Jeremy, who's 11, and Melissa, who's 6. I thought we had a perfect marriage and a picture-perfect family. Our personal life seemed great to me, or at least that's what I thought. She traveled once a month, staying for 2 or 3 nights in cities far away. If she was up to something, she might have seen it as a quiet opportunity. It seemed like losing the rings had really upset her, and she chose replacements that looked just like the originals I had bought. I didn't have much money, so they weren't fancy rings, and making copies wasn't too expensive. She could have told the insurance company about the loss, but I probably would have found out if her purse had really been stolen at the hotel. I couldn't help but wonder what she said was missing. That I looked for the hotel's number and called them. I asked if they had any records of my wife's theft. Surprisingly, they said they had. With my earnings, it wasn't a big purchase and making a near replica wasn't too costly. She could have reported the loss to the insurance company, but I probably would have found out if her purse was genuinely stolen at the hotel. She should have reported it. I couldn't help but wonder what she claimed as missing. I decided to find the hotel's contact number and made the call. I asked about any records related to the theft of my wife's. Surprisingly, they confirmed having a written account of the incident. I requested a copy to be faxed to me, and I received it shortly. The report was composed and signed by Claire herself. In the statement, Claire mentioned that her purse was stolen while she was dancing in the hall. She had left her purse at the booth where she was seated, and upon her return it had vanished. Remarkably, CLA explicitly noted her hesitation to involve the police. As I absorbed this information, my thoughts raced, overwhelmed by the implications of what I had uncovered. She had deceived me. I asked for a copy of the incident report, and it came by fax pretty quickly. Claire wrote the report herself, and she signed it. In it, she said that her handbag was stolen while she was dancing in the hall. She said she'd left her bag at the booth where she was sitting, and when she came back, it was gone. Claire also said that she didn't want to involve the police. As I read this, I thought about what it meant. She'd lied to me about the stolen rings, and she'd made up a story about shoplifting. There might be another explanation, but I couldn't think of one. I knew I had to find out why those rings were so important to her, or I'd never stop thinking about them. I knew for sure that the rings were in her bag when she was dancing with. She kept the truth about the stolen rings hidden and also invented a story about shoplifting. I couldn't think of any other explanation for what had happened. I knew I had to find out what the rings meant or I would never stop thinking about them. I knew for sure that she had the rings in her handbag when she was dancing with some guy. A few weeks had gone by since the incident and she was about to go on another trip in a few days. I knew I had to find out more about her trip. I wanted to know what she usually did in the evenings when she wasn't with us. Maybe losing the rings had been a wake-up call for her to change her behavior. I knew that if I found out she had been unfaithful, it would mean the end of our marriage. I dreaded thinking about how it might affect our kids. She was a great mother, but I couldn't bear the thought of her having custody of the kids, especially with her frequent business trips. I raced through my mind, desperately looking for any potential clues to show if she was faithful. What other information might hint at her actions during her trips? Did she have unprotected sex or insist on using contraceptives? I assumed she would opt for protection because she wouldn't want to risk. I was really worried about how this might affect our kids. She was definitely a great mother, but I couldn't bear the thought of her having custody of the kids, especially with her frequent business trips. I was desperate to find any clues to show if she was faithful. What other information might suggest what she was doing during her trips? Did she have unprotected sex or use contraceptives? I assumed she would use protection because she wouldn't want to risk bringing home infections or an unwanted pregnancy. I had a vasectomy after the birth of our second child, so pregnancy was impossible. She couldn't rely on the men she met having protection, so she must have had her own. One question remained: where did she keep them? It was unlikely she stored them at our house or in the car, so the office seemed the most likely place. She probably carried them with her on business trips. I knew she transported her work papers, laptop and presentation materials. So, there's the question of how she got them. I don't think she stored them at home or in the car, so the office seemed the most likely place. I guess she probably carried them with her on business trips, since she had a big briefcase she kept in her office for her work papers, laptop and presentation materials. But if she had an early morning flight, she'd bring her bag home the night before and pack it in a suitcase for the airport. This detail was crucial. I needed to find an opportunity to search the briefcase before her departure. I hoped her next trip involved an early morning flight. I made a deliberate choice to remain calm and composed, not displaying any signs that something was wrong. As it happened, when the kids returned from school, I was occupied. She kept her large briefcase in her office, but if she had an early morning flight, she'd bring her bag home the night before and pack it in a suitcase for the airport. This detail was crucial. I needed to find an opportunity to search the briefcase before her departure. I hoped her next trip involved an early morning flight. I made a deliberate choice to remain calm and composed, not displaying any signs that something was wrong. When the kids returned from school, I was occupied with various tasks and had little time to dwell on my suspicions. Nonetheless, the specter of her infidelity continued to linger in the back of my mind. When CLA returned from work, I found myself in a bit of a mess. While preparing dinner, I accidentally spilled a dish of beans, creating a mess on the floor. The resulting chaos of cleaning up and managing the kids' activities left me looking somewhat disheveled. Fortunately, she didn't seem to notice any unusual behavior from me, as I was busy with all sorts of tasks and didn't really have time to think about my suspicions. But the idea of her being unfaithful kept on coming to mind. When CLA got home from work, I was a bit all over the place. I made a bit of a mess when I spilled a dish of beans on the floor while I was getting dinner ready. Then I had to clean up and get the kids on with their activities, and I ended up looking a bit messy. But she didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. After things had calmed down and I'd cleaned up, I gave her a kiss on the cheek. We sat down at the table like we normally do to have dinner and chat. I didn't think she'd have any doubts about her trip, so I said, "You're off on another trip in a couple of days." She didn't seem too excited about it. "It's the same old routine." "I'm not." After things had calmed down and we'd cleaned up, I gave her a kiss on the cheek. We sat down at the table like we normally did to have dinner and chat. I didn't think she'd have any doubts about her upcoming trip, so I asked if she was heading out on another trip in a couple of days. She didn't seem too excited about it. I asked her if she was looking forward to it, and she wasn't. I asked her if she'd thought about applying for a different role, since she'd been with the company for a while and knew about all the different parts of it. I thought she could probably adapt to almost any position. She said she wanted to gain more experience before she switched to a desk job, but I asked her to think about the kids. I said, "I really miss you when you're not home," and hoped that she'd change her mind. "I know, I'm sorry." She responded, sympathizing. "I miss all of you too." I continued, "So where exactly are you headed this time? Will you be leaving in the morning, giving us a chance to spend some time together before your departure?" I held her gaze, mindful that our children could hear us. Despite trying to appear normal, my anxiety was evident as my stomach rumbled, making it difficult to eat. She seemed to think everything was fine, as her reaction. She was eating without really enjoying it, so I thought maybe she had stomach issues, but then I thought maybe I was overthinking it. I still felt like I should search her briefcase, though, because it might tell me more about how loyal she is. "I'm only going to Denton, so I'll be leaving tomorrow morning at 7:30. She said I need something to keep me going until I get back on Friday, and she gave me a wink, so I said something like that, too. Playful, I tried to keep things normal. Surprisingly, she blushed when she said she was bringing her briefcase home the night before her trip, so she wouldn't be stopping at the office before heading to the airport. Given how genuine she seemed about the upcoming trip in front of our kids and me, you might think she hadn't been unfaithful while traveling, or she had become good at hiding it. I'm hoping to find out the truth when. I had a look in her briefcase the night before her trip. CLA came home feeling good, parked her car next to mine in the garage like always, and looked clearly excited. I wondered if it was because of our chat or if there was something else going on. When she got in, she didn't bring her briefcase with her, so I guess it was still in the car. I was busy with dinner, so we sat down at the table. She was relaxed. I had a good look through her briefcase the night before her trip. CLA was in high spirits when she got home. She parked her car next to mine in the garage, as usual, and looked really excited. This made me wonder if it was because of our chat the other day, or if there was another reason. When she got in, she didn't bring her briefcase with her, so I guess she still had it in the car. We sat down at the table and I asked her if I could get her suitcase from the garage after we'd finished eating. Of course, I said, trying not to look suspicious. Are you all set for your trip? She asked, trying to reassure me. Oh, it's a routine trip. My briefcase is in the car, ready for the journey. I'll pack an overnight bag with the essentials to try and keep things normal. I asked, do you have any plans while you're away, for the kids? I asked if I could get her suitcase from the garage after we finished eating, and she said yes, not looking suspicious. Are you all set for your trip? She asked, trying to reassure me. Oh, it's a routine trip. My briefcase is in the car, ready for the journey. I'll pack an overnight bag with the essentials, to keep it normal. I asked if she had any plans while she was away, and if she would stick to their usual daily routine during the week. Maybe we could plan something family-friendly for the weekend, she replied, excited about the idea. Sounds like a plan, I responded. After we finished dinner, she kindly helped me clear the table in the kitchen and loaded the dishwasher. Once she was done, she headed to the bedroom to pack her things, while I made my way to the garage to get her suitcase. When I checked the car, I didn't find the briefcase inside. I said, I'll stick to our usual daily routine during the week, but we could plan something family-friendly for the weekend. She replied, that sounds like a plan. I agree, I said. After we finished dinner, she kindly helped me clear the table in the kitchen and loaded the dishwasher. Once she'd finished, she headed to the bedroom to pack her things, while I made my way to the garage to retrieve her suitcase. I inspected the car and couldn't find the briefcase inside, which made me think it was securely placed in the boot. I'd already come up with a plan to access it later in the evening. When I returned to the bedroom with her suitcase, I casually asked, do you know where the car keys are? My tire seems to be slowly losing air. If I take it to the station, Jerry can fix it right away. For a brief moment, she appeared puzzled, but then she reached for her purse and handed me the car keys. She proposed an alternative, saying, what if? I figured it was safely stowed in the boot. I'd already made a plan to get to it later that evening. When I got back to the bedroom with her suitcase, I asked, do you know where the car keys are? My tire seems to be slowly losing air. If I take it to the station, Jerry can fix it right away. For a moment, she looked puzzled, but then she reached for her handbag and gave me the car keys. She said, use the spare tire. It's meant for emergencies. I replied, yes, the spare tire is for emergencies, but we have enough time to properly fix this. I think that's the best course of action. I hurried back to the garage before she could change her mind. I drove her car out of the garage and headed to the junction station, which is owned by my friend Jerry from school. I pulled up in front of one of the service bays and honked my horn. I told him, yes, the spare tire is for emergencies, but we have enough time to properly fix this. I think that's the best course of action. I hurried back to the garage before she could change her mind. I drove her car out of the garage and headed to the junction station, which is owned by my friend Jerry from school. Pulling up in front of one of the service bays, I honked my horn to get his attention. Jerry noticed me and opened the bay door, allowing me to drive in before closing it behind me. What's going on, buddy? Jerry asked, curiously. My tire was supposed to be fixed here, but I needed a little time to check something else. Sensing that I might have some issues at home, Jerry asked, trouble at home, buddy? I admitted reluctantly, opening the trunk and retrieving CLA's briefcase, placing it on a nearby workbench. I unlocked it. Jerry realized. To get his attention, Jerry noticed me and opened the bay door, letting me drive in before closing it again. What's going on, buddy? Jerry asked, curious. My tire was supposed to be fixed here, but I needed a little time to check something else, I replied. You got into some trouble at home, buddy? Jerry asked, sensing that I might have some issues at home. Maybe, I admitted reluctantly, opening the trunk and retrieving CLA's briefcase. I placed it on a nearby workbench and unlocked it. Jerry realized a customer needed him, and simply said, "Well, I've got a customer, so take your time." My friend nodded to Jerry, who returned to the small shop attached to his station. I began to search the briefcase meticulously, ensuring that I didn't disturb anything. My hands explored the pockets on the lid, unnecessarily, and to my shock, I discovered a package that caught my attention. When I removed it, my heart sank as I realized it was an open package of contraceptives with about 3 pieces. My worst fears were confirmed when I realized I'd found an open packet of contraceptives with about 3 pieces missing. I carefully put the packet back where I'd found it and closed the briefcase once more, stashing it in the boot and securing it. Just as Jerry returned, he asked, "Didn't find what you were looking for? What's going on?" "I'm afraid so," I replied, my voice tinged with a mix of disappointment and sadness. "Jerry, if I stay here a bit longer, perhaps you could check the tire pressure while I pretend to have resolved the issue." I was pretty sure my worst fears were confirmed. I carefully put the package back where I'd found it and closed the briefcase again. I stashed it in the boot and locked it, just as Jerry returned. "Didn't find what you were looking for?" he asked, sounding curious. "What's going on?" I asked, feeling a bit disappointed and sad. Jerry looked at me, and I could tell he was wondering why I wasn't getting out of the car. But he didn't say anything. He was a loyal friend. While he checked the tire pressure, I drove out of the bay and pulled up at a petrol station. I filled the tank, not sure I'd be doing that for her again. I was grateful to Jerry for understanding, and I started to think about how I was going to get home. As I pulled into the garage, I felt like there was a dark cloud over my head, and I started to panic. I was angry and frustrated, and I couldn't understand how she could do this to us. I tried to stay calm and focus on the next steps, like getting full custody of our kids. I needed proof that she'd been unfaithful, and even though she wasn't perfect as a partner, I knew she was a good mother. The kids needed a maternal figure, and it was likely that visitation rights would be granted. My main goal was to get full legal custody. She will. I was angry and frustrated. How could she do this to us? Our marriage, our kids, me? I had to get my head together and focus on the next step. I needed proof she'd been unfaithful and misbehaving. She wasn't a great partner, but she was a good mother. The kids needed a maternal figure. I wanted full custody. She'll have to explain why we're getting divorced to her brother and friends. I went into the house and called from the bedroom. Everything set. There was a minor issue with a nail. "Okay, thanks." She still avoided eye contact. I went to the kitchen for a beer and then had a seat with the kids watching TV. About 30 minutes later, Claire joined us. She sat next to me on the couch. By then, I was a mess. I had to explain the reasons behind our divorce to her brother and friends. As I went into the house, I called out from the bedroom, saying, "It's all set. There was just a minor issue with a nail." "Okay, thanks," she replied, still avoiding eye contact. Seeking solace, I went to the kitchen for a beer and then settled in the family room with the kids, who were watching a TV show. About 30 minutes later, Claire joined us in the room and sat beside me on the couch. By then, my emotions had settled, but I felt a deep sadness wash over me as I realized our once happy family was soon to be a thing of the past. To my surprise, Claire moved closer and snuggled up to me, whispering in my ear. She asked, "Are you ready for tonight?" After taking a sip of beer, I replied, "I think so, but I have a stomach ache." Claire responded, "Oh, that's too bad, honey. I'm here for you." Holding on to me, she softly said, "I love you," and I instinctively put my arms around her. I'd settled down, but I felt really down when I thought about how our family was going to change. I was surprised when CLA moved closer and snuggled up to me, whispering in my ear. She asked, "Are you ready for tonight?" I said, "I think so, but I have a stomach ache." Claire said, "Oh, that's too bad, honey," and held me. She softly said, "I love you," and I put my arm around her shoulders. I had mixed feelings, but I could see she still liked me. I couldn't help but wonder why she'd done it. Was it for excitement, or was she looking for more connection than I could give her? I might never fully understand, but it was clear that I didn't trust her anymore. We put the kids to bed together, and as she kissed our little angels good night, I looked at her, knowing that by morning she would. I put my arms around her shoulders, trying not to feel too mixed up. I guess there was still a bit of affection there, even if she'd betrayed me. I couldn't help but wonder why she'd done it. Was it for excitement, or was she just looking for more connection than I could give her? I might never fully understand, but it was obvious that my trust in her had been broken. We put the kids to bed together, and as she kissed our little angels good night, I couldn't help but look at her, knowing that by morning she would be gone. They were used to her traveling a lot, so they weren't too worried. That night, we made love, but it lacked the usual passion. Sensing my distress, CLA asked, anxiously, "Is your stomach still bothering you, dear?" I nodded and replied, "Yes, but I can handle it." I really hoped she would choose our love and marriage over the upcoming trip. I asked, "Do you really need to go on this trip?" Deep down, I wished it were all just a nightmare that would vanish. She sighed and replied, "I do." Reluctantly, I left them to it. They were already used to her traveling a lot, so they weren't too bothered. That night, we had sex, but it wasn't as passionate as usual. I could tell CLA was worried, so she asked, "Is your stomach still bothering you, dear?" I nodded and said, "Yeah, but I can handle it." I really hoped she would choose our love and marriage over the upcoming trip. I asked, "Do you really need to go on this trip?" Deep down, I wished it were all just a nightmare that would vanish. She sighed and replied, "I'm sorry, honey, but this trip is necessary. I'll do my best to wrap things up and get home as soon as I can. I'm really looking forward to the weekend with all of you." I sighed and said, "Okay, honey, it's time to get some sleep. You have to get up early for your flight. I'll take a quick shower now, so I won't have to worry about it in the morning, okay?" I replied while, "I'm sorry, honey, but this trip is necessary. I'll do my best to get things wrapped up and get home as soon as I can. I'm really looking forward to the weekend with all of you, but I'm also feeling a bit down." I sighed and said, "Okay, honey, it's time to get some sleep. You have to get up early for your flight. I'll have a quick shower now, so I won't have to worry about it in the morning, okay?" She stepped into the shower. I had an idea, so I checked her suitcase to see what she had packed. The clothes on top seemed businesslike, but I was surprised to find, upon closer inspection, a selection of her most seductive lingerie and a small black cocktail dress in which she always looked irresistible. Respecting her personal space, I carefully returned everything to its place, closed the suitcase, and went back to bed. I couldn't sleep that night, and when I heard CLA stirring around 5 in the morning, I stayed in bed, choosing not to say goodbye like we usually did. I felt a mix of tiredness and sadness as I bent down to give her a kiss on the cheek before she left. She asked, "Still not feeling well, honey?" I just nodded, trying to express the turmoil within me. With the sound of the garage door closing, I finally got out of bed and made my way to the shower. I knew the day ahead would be filled with challenges after seeing the kids off to. After having breakfast and seeing the kids off to school, I turned to the phone book to search for a private detective service in the yellow pages. My main criteria were to find an agency with a nationwide presence, preferably in the city Claire was heading to. I reached out to several agencies and eventually found one with a branch in her destination area. I set up a meeting with them for the same morning, hoping they could provide the necessary information. Next on my agenda was finding a divorce attorney. A friend had recommended a specific lawyer, so I was in the middle of looking through the yellow pages for a private detective when I got a call from Claire. She was heading to the city where I was trying to find an agency with a branch there. I got in touch with one and arranged to meet them there that same morning. I was hoping they could give me the information I needed. Next, I was trying to find a divorce attorney. A friend had recommended a specific lawyer, so I got his contact details and gave him a call. I arranged an appointment for the afternoon, hoping this lawyer could guide me through the challenging process we were about to face. When I arrived at the private investigator's office, I discussed my concerns and arranged for CLA to be surveilled on the evening she was away. I provided them with a photo of CLA and details of her travel route to aid in their identification. They assured me they would gather photos and compile a report on her activities as soon as she was out and about. I gave him my contact details and he called me back. I arranged to see him in the afternoon, and he said he'd be able to help me through the difficult process. When I got to the private detective's office, I told him what I was worried about and said I wanted to have CLA surveilled on the evening she was away. I gave them a photo of CLA and the route she usually takes to work, to help them identify her. They said they'd take photos and send a report on what she was doing as soon as she finished work. To make sure we could communicate easily, they said they'd send information to their office in Denton by email and they'd give me a full report by Monday morning. I was happy with what they said they'd do, so I paid a lot of money in advance to cover their costs. They said they might not be able to take photos, but they'd do their best to get as many as possible. I agreed that this would be okay. My meeting with the lawyer in the afternoon went as I thought it would. He explained that in our state when the business day ended, they agreed to send info to their Denton office by email and promised to provide a full report by Monday morning. I was happy with their offer, so I paid a lot up front for their services. They said they might not be able to take photos, but they'd do their best to get as many as possible. My afternoon meeting with the lawyer went as expected. He explained that in our state, divorce follows a no-fault principle, meaning there's no need to assign blame. But, as I'm the main caregiver for our children, it's likely I'll be granted custody. It was important for me to understand that CLA would get significant visitation rights for our children. Also, our property would be split equally, with both sides getting an even split of 50% alimony. Alimony wouldn't be necessary because of our similar incomes, but since I'd get custody of the children, Claire would. Divorce is based on no fault, so there's no need to point the finger at anyone. I look after the kids full-time, so it's likely I'll get custody. It was important to me to know that CLA would get good visitation rights for the kids. We're both pretty well off, so we'll split the property 50-50, and we won't need alimony because our incomes are similar. But since I'm going to get custody of the kids, Claire will have to pay alimony. I wasn't bothered about the inheritance she got, she can keep it. My main priority was the kids' well-being. I told the lawyer to get the documents ready to give to CLA on Monday, saying we couldn't agree. I also asked her to agree to leave the house right away. The lawyer said that as the kids' guardian, I had the right to make this request. We decided that once the kids turned 18, we'd sell the house and split the money. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt pretty good, knowing life would move forward for me and the kids, while CLA would have to deal with the consequences of her betrayal. At that moment, I didn't do anything straight away about our finances, insurance, or other legal stuff, thinking I'd have enough time to sort it out after serving her with divorce papers, given her inheritance. I figured she wouldn't have to stress about her share of our joint savings when it was time for school to end. That I headed home to catch the bus on Friday afternoon. When CLA returned, I kindly offered to take care of her laundry, but she politely declined, insisting she would handle it later. I couldn't help but grin, recognizing how playfully mischievous I had been deep down. I totally got why she preferred to manage the laundry herself. It was crucial for her to I thought she wouldn't have to worry about her share of our joint savings when it was time for school to end. I headed home to catch the bus on Friday afternoon when CLA returned. I kindly offered to take care of her laundry, but she politely declined, insisting she would do it later. I couldn't help but grin, realizing how playfully mischievous I had been. I totally get why she preferred to manage the laundry herself. It was crucial for her to keep her extramarital affairs concealed at all costs. Later, as we lay in bed, CLA expressed concern about my ongoing stomach issues and suggested I see a doctor. This has been persisting for too long, she emphasized. I playfully responded to CLA, letting her know that I intended to try a new medication recommended by a friend to address my persistent stomach problems. I expressed optimism that this would resolve the issue and bring her back to me soon. When we embraced, she whispered that she missed me greatly. On Monday, as the kids left for school and CLA headed to work, I got a call from the detective agency saying they had a report ready. I told them I'd be there shortly, and within 30 minutes, I was sitting down with the office manager discussing the details. The office manager told me that a report with attached photos had been faxed from Denton that morning. He admitted he hadn't had time to read the entire report, but upon a quick scan and a glance at, on Monday, as the kids left for school and I headed to work, I got a call from the detective agency saying they had a report ready. I told them I'd be there shortly, and within 30 minutes, I was sitting down with the office manager, discussing the details. The office manager told me that a report with attached photos had been faxed from Denton that morning. He admitted he hadn't had time to read the entire report, but after a quick scan and a glance at the photos, it seemed highly incriminating. I took a copy of the report and started reading its contents. The subject of the report was identified as Claire Barton. According to the report, the surveillance of the woman began at 5:17 p.m. on Wednesday, June 16, in the lobby of the Denton Marriott Hotel. Her identity was confirmed by comparing a photo obtained from the Merville office. Upon closer examination of the report, it turned out that she was wearing a company badge, which confirmed who she was. The report also said what the woman was doing and that she got the elevator with a staff member and went to room 414 at 5:23 p.m. The report said the woman was alone at that time. There was also a photo in the report, it was labeled Exhibit 1A, that showed the woman dressed professionally before she went into the room. When we looked at the photo, there was a badge on her that confirmed who she was. The report also said how she got there and that she had a briefcase when she got in the elevator. A staff member came with her and checked she had got to room 414 at 5:23 p.m. It's important to note that the report said the subject was alone at that time. The report also had a photograph, labeled Exhibit 1A, which showed the subject dressed professionally before she went into the room. When you look at the photo, it's clear that she still wore rings. The photo was clearly taken on a mobile phone. The report said that the agents had rented a room across from the subject's room at 6:31 p.m. They got a signal that the subject had left her room and was heading for the elevator a minute later, at 6:32 p.m. The subject got out of the elevator and went into the lobby. The report noted that she was dressed as described in Example 1b. It was clear that CLA was wearing a small black cocktail dress with high heels. She was also wearing a necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary, but what stood out the most was the absence of wedding rings on her left hand. The photo clearly showed that she wasn't wearing them. The report mentioned that the staff had rented a room across from hers. A minute later, at 6:32 p.m., the subject exited the elevator and entered the lobby. The report noted that she was dressed as described in Example 1b. When we looked at Example 1b, we saw that CLA was wearing a small black cocktail dress with high heels. She was also wearing a necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary. But what stood out the most was that she wasn't wearing a wedding ring on her left hand. The photo clearly showed that she wasn't wearing one. The report said that the staff had rented a room across from hers. A minute later, at 6:32 p.m., the subject got out of the elevator and went into the lobby. The report said she was dressed like in example 1B. When we looked at example 1B, it was clear that Claire was wearing a small black cocktail dress with high heels. She was also wearing a necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary. But what stood out the most was that she wasn't wearing a wedding ring on her left hand. The photo clearly showed that she wasn't. The report noted that the subject exited the elevator and entered the lobby. It was clear from example 1B that Claire was wearing a small black cocktail dress and high heels, and she was also wearing a necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary. However, what stood out the most was the absence of wedding rings on her left hand. The photo clearly showed that she wasn't wearing them. The photo identified as Exhibit 1D displays Claire and a man in a tight embrace, engaged in a passionate kiss, while seated in a booth. The intensity of their connection was clearly visible in the picture. At 8:51 p.m., the report noted that both individuals left the restaurant and took the elevator to Claire's floor. Another photo, labeled Exhibit 1E, captures the moment when Claire and the man entered her room, specifically room 4. The photo, Exhibit 1D, shows Claire and a man in a tight embrace, kissing passionately in a booth. The picture clearly shows how close they were. At 8:51 p.m., the report says they left the restaurant, took the elevator up to Claire's floor, and went into her room, room 4. In the photo, Exhibit 1E, you can see that Claire looks slightly drunk but clearly enjoying the evening. At 11:13 p.m., the man left Claire's room and the building. The report included the license plate number of a car belonging to Alexander B. Tate, who lives at 1424 Elia Drive in Denton. Alexander B. Tate is married with 2 young children. When I read the report more carefully, it became clear that Claire had a repeat performance. The next night, she was out with another guy. The report was signed by an investigator from Denton. This made me really anxious and I felt angry. It was obvious that my wife was having an affair while she was away. I couldn't get my head around what she'd done. It was worse than I could have imagined. Even the fact that Claire had lost her wedding rings didn't stop her from being careless. After I paid the private detective, I thanked them and left. I made sure to take 2 extra copies of the report and put them on a CD to keep them safe. When I got back home, I didn't hang about and straight away called my divorce attorney. I asked about the divorce papers and the attorney said they were ready for filing. I told them to get the papers filed and said I wanted them to be served to her at her workplace the next day. The attorney said they could do that and asked for her workplace address, which I gave them straight away. I wanted to humiliate her during the divorce proceedings, so I gave her the divorce papers at work. It was a way of getting back at her for what she did that night, and also to make sure she knew I didn't want her anymore. Claire seemed to know something was wrong, maybe because she thought I'd found something out, but she didn't say anything. She did say she hoped I'd get better quickly, and she also seemed a bit distant, but I didn't say anything about that. I just ignored it. I woke up early after a night of not much sleep and got on with my work on the computer until the kids woke up. Then I went to the kitchen to make breakfast. After the meal, I said goodbye to CLA when she left for work. She came over to me for a hug and a kiss, but I just gave her a playful hug and told her to get on with it. At that moment, I felt like she might have had a clue about what was going to happen. I shut the door after her, and tears welled up in her eyes. She whispered, "I love you," as she left. I felt really sad, and I wanted to cry, but I quickly composed myself because the kids needed me and I had to get them ready for the school bus. At about 10:45 a.m., the phone rang, and I saw that it was CLA's workplace. I answered the call without saying anything, and there was a short pause. I closed the door after her, and she said, "I love you," as she was leaving. I felt really sad and I wanted to cry, but I stopped myself because the kids needed me and I had to get them ready for the school bus. At about 10:45 a.m. the phone rang and it was CLA. I answered without saying anything, and there was a short pause. Then CLA said, "I'm sorry," in a shaking voice and in a whisper. The line went dead and I didn't say anything. CLA didn't come home that night and I thought maybe she was still being deceitful, not caring about her husband. I knew I was angry, but I also thought maybe I was being too hard on her. The kids were sad because their mother wasn't there and they didn't know where she was. To cheer them up, I invited them to have dinner at a McDonald's cafe. By the time we got home, after dinner, the kids were knackered and went straight to bed. The next morning, Claire called with a request, "Honey, can I come home and pack my things? Can we talk?" I felt a bit guilty, but I quickly got over it. I replied calmly, "Why don't you come between 9 o'clock and noon, as I continue? Then the kids and I won't." I invited them to have dinner at a McDonald's cafe to cheer them up. By the time we got home, the kids were shattered and went straight to bed. The next morning, Claire called with a request, "Honey, can I come home and pack my things? Can we talk?" I felt a bit guilty, but I quickly got over it. I replied calmly, "Why don't you come between 9 o'clock and noon? The kids and I won't be here." I made it clear that I'd speak with her one-on-one in my lawyer's office only after she signed, notarized and returned the divorce documents. "Then I'll listen to whatever you have to say." There was a lot at stake. Before Claire answered, "Good," the phone fell silent again. She signed the divorce papers, and 6 months later, our marriage officially came to an end. It turned out that she became pregnant during the affair. Unfortunately, when she attempted to, I made it clear to her that I'd only speak to her one-on-one in my lawyer's office once she'd signed, notarized and returned the divorce documents. I was keen to hear what she had to say. There was a lot at stake, and as soon as Claire answered the phone, we had a brief chat. She signed the divorce papers, and 6 months later, our marriage officially came to an end. It turned out that she'd become pregnant during the affair. Unfortunately, when she tried to conceal it from her last lover, contraception failed, considering it was near her childbearing age. Even if I hadn't found out about her infidelity through the lost rings, the truth would probably have come out eventually. There were rumors that she'd started dating again. If she ever gets close to getting married again, I've thought about honestly warning her future spouse about her unfaithfulness. It seems unnecessary for her to deceive and hurt another person. We had a meeting, and during our conversation in my lawyer's office I told her what I thought, and she begged me to think again about getting a divorce. She said it was really hard for her not to be able to see the kids whenever she wanted. But I said I couldn't trust her anymore. Then she said she'd been seeing a psychologist who said she had nymphomania. She said her impulses were under control, even though she said she still had them. But I said that wasn't enough for me. I said that even if she said she could control herself, the fact that she couldn't was enough for me. I told her what I thought, and she begged me not to get a divorce. She said it was hard for her not to have full access to the kids, but I said I couldn't trust her. Then she said she'd been seeing a psychologist who said she had nymphomania. She said her impulses were under control, but I said that wasn't enough. The fact that she hadn't sought help earlier showed that she hadn't been trying. If she'd addressed her cravings from the start, she might not have ended up where she is now. When I left the lawyer's office, she was still crying. I'd recently got in touch with a school friend who keeps me updated. I found out that he works at a nightclub and said he'd seen my ex-wife at the club, where she goes on different nights with different men and behaves. I was pretty hurt that my kids had such an irresponsible mother. Maybe my ex-wife never recovered from nymphomania. Then a friend of Claire's called me to say Claire wasn't doing well health-wise and that my ex-wife needed my help because she'd caught herpes. I felt for her, but I said I couldn't help and I didn't want to. Claire chose this lifestyle, so it's her own problem. I've started dating again and I've actually found someone special. She's around my age and she's divorced. She found out that her ex was being unfaithful and she didn't put up with that kind of behavior. She's strong and resilient, which I really admire. It seems like my kids like her too. I think this is just a natural progression, and it's only a matter of time before I take our relationship to the next level.